Thurston County Board of County Commissioners work session. It's Thursday, June 3rd, 2021, 9:03 a.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. To my left is Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards. Commissioner Carolina Mejia is excused this week. We have our County Manager Amir Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell through our through Zoom, and we have public access through our YouTube channel or conference line at 360-252-9020. And the PIN is 1234. Today's topic is Capital Improvement Program Minor Amendment. We have an hour, and Jennifer Davis, I see, is here from our Community Planning and Economic Development Department, and I'll let the County Manager get us going.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning. This briefing, no decisions are expected for you today, just to hear what the Planning Commission public hearing that occurred, I believe, last night. And, you know, it is related to the two amendments on the capital improvement programs. One is to add the Mudman Complex and also adding the atrium, the 3000 Pacific Avenue building, as part of the capital improvement program. And you heard last week that there was a prudent approach to go through this process, although that we had some initial feedback based on the projects stated and included on the existing capital facilities program will allow us to go through with those two projects. That I think it was more of a prudent approach just to be prescriptive on the capital improvement programs. So Jennifer's going to give you a perspective of the last night's public hearing, and also give you some feedback in terms of perhaps some of the recommendations the Planning Commission ended up with.
Great, good morning. Again, Jennifer Davis with CPED. So Community Planning was asked just a couple of months ago to process these amendments to the existing 2021-2026 capital improvement program. So again, this is the 6-year financing plan piece of the overall county capital facilities plan. So the CIP lists all of the county's anticipated projects in the coming 6 years. And we do that to ensure maximum transparency for the public so that they understand how public dollars are being spent for capital facilities. And then these two projects were asked to be added in. Since you were going through a budget amendment to consider these projects, we needed to align the capital improvement program with that budget, which the Growth Management Act allows us to do. So the amendment proposal was to ensure full transparency about these projects and to allow for REIT funds to be spent on them, because under state law, in order to expend REIT funds, the projects have to be listed in your capital facilities plan. So this ensures and goes the extra mile to ensure, I think, that we're following all of those proper procedures. And again, this is an amendment to the comprehensive plan, what I am facilitating, what CPED facilitates. So it's not the budget decision, it's not the actual project decision, it's amending the comprehensive plan to ensure that these projects are accounted for in that capital improvement program. So we follow the normal comprehensive plan amendment process, including opportunity for public review, notification of Department of Commerce, SEPA, and Planning Commission review. So last night, the Planning Commission held its duly noticed public hearing on this item. We received no written public comment ahead of the public hearing, but we did have 3 public comments during oral testimony at the hearing, and they were all against the projects, adding the projects. They were primarily focused on the atrium or the 3000 Pacific building, with concerns expressed about the county process, the cost, and the need for this space. And then Planning Commissioner Vice Chair Casino also expressed a lot of concern about these projects. His comments were focused primarily on the atrium building, questioning whether the costing was appropriate, whether the county really needed the new space. There was discussion amongst the planning commissioners, again, focused mostly on the atrium building, somewhat on the Mottman complex. Robin did an amazing job answering all of their questions. And ultimately, the Planning Commission voted 6-1 against recommending these amendments to the CIP. Their specific motion was to recommend not to move forward with the atrium project and to delay a decision on whether or not to add the Mottman complex process until they can have a follow-up work session. They did not specify the additional information that they need to have about the Mottman complex for that work session. Since this recommendation was made just last night, I don't have a formal recommendation letter to share with you, but I'm going to try to get that from the chair of the Planning Commission this week and forward that to you. Again, all of the information about the amendments are in your packet with the strike-through underlying changes for you to review. And today's briefing is just to allow you to have a discussion about this, about the Planning Commission recommendation, any questions about the comp plan process. And then the next step would be for you, if you wanted to move forward with one or both projects, to set a public hearing at your upcoming Tuesday meeting in order to have action on these proposals timely with your budget amendment process, which is the goal here. You have full discretion as the Board of County Commissioners to do with the Planning Commission recommendation what you will. Again, the Planning Commission recommendations only relate to the comp plan amendment part of all of this. They do not have authority to make recommendations on county budget decisions or even specific projects. But that is what they wanted to relay, that they have concerns about these projects and adding them to the CIP and having county funds spent on them at this time. And I'm happy to answer questions.
How much information did they have? Have they had all the same information that we've had well ahead of time, or was this relatively new to them?
Well, they've had a briefing last month. I have to look up the date, but we did provide them with a briefing on these projects, same materials that you have in your packet, actually, with the project descriptions and the updated finance tables. And Assistant Manager Campbell was at that briefing with the Planning Commission to answer any questions. And then they had, they do at least a 20-day public hearing notice before their public hearing. And I did not receive additional follow-up questions from them, which I sometimes get on topics. But I think some of them had dived into this close to the public hearing last night and had done some research on their own and had some things to say about these projects, and they relayed those to their fellow planning commissioners, and that's how they reached their decision.
When you say the packet that we've got, do you mean the packet that we were given this morning? It was for 9 o'clock this morning?
I'm not sure when you're given your packets, but yes, what attachments to your briefing presentation form, which includes the summary of the capital improvement program amendments with the strikeout and underlines of the financial tables and the project descriptions, those were attached to the briefing materials I provided this morning's briefing.
That's what you have.
So this is what they based their information on, is this packet here, basically? Other than if they did some other research on their own?
Yes, there was a staff report with the same attachments that you have received, which describe each project. So every project in the capital facilities plan has a full project description, describes the need for it, justification, what it is, and then the anticipated costs and where it's located. And so all of that information was provided to the Planning Commission, yes.
Jennifer, you mentioned concerns about the costs, and then you mentioned concerns about the need for the space. And I find the second one kind of astonishing after the years and years of studies and preparation for a new courthouse proposal and et cetera, et cetera. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, was there any detail given in the concern about the fact that the county might not actually need any new space? I can't figure out what that could be based on, so I'm just curious if there was any explanation there.
There was opinions offered on that by certain planning commissioners, questioning the need for space given the fact that in recent times we've seen a lot of teleworking and maybe empty offices up at the courthouse buildings, half empty parking lots. I believe things like that were mentioned. And then just questions in general about the need for the county to have this amount of space to accommodate their offices. And Assistant County Manager Campbell really did answer a lot of those questions, detailing all of the different offices that needed this additional space, and that we've been kind of bursting at the seams for years, and that it's also reflected in our existing CFP in Chapter 6 of our comprehensive plan, talking about our space needs. So there was just some opinions offered based on certain perceptions about whether or not the county really needs the space to move. And I don't know, Robin, if you wanted to add to that.
I would just add that one of the comments was that we are basing the space needs on a study done in 2018, and things have changed since then, and we've not updated the needs analysis.
Yeah, I'd like to, Jennifer, you can provide additional perspective. It seems to me a little bit concerning that the Planning Commission has made statements related to a budget and expenditures. And I believe that is truly out of their purview as to how they can make statements, because that's within the purview of the Board of County Commissioners, how they determine expenditures should be spent.
Excuse me, could I clarify something? You said the county commissioners made us.
No, the commissioners, the planning commissioners.
Okay.
Making statements about the budget, which I believe that is outside of their purview. So if you can elaborate on that, because that, to me, based on what I'm hearing, raises concerns, because that is, any recommendations related to budget and expenditures should not be coming from the Planning Commission. This is entirely up to the legislative authority of the Board of County Commissioners to determine how the expenditure should be allocated in the county. So can you provide a perspective on that, if possible?
My perspective is that I agree that the Planning Commission's authority extends to comprehensive plan amendments and making advisory recommendations on those. As part of the CIP, there are cost estimates provided. That's part of the requirements under the Growth Management Act. It's a financing plan, though. It's not a budget. But there were quite detailed comments made by at least one planning commissioner last night, questioning costs per square foot, and he had done some of his own research looking into that and questioning whether that was a good enough deal for the county. And so yeah, he had done a lot of his own independent research on the atrium building and the cost to renovate that space, and had opinions about that. And again, I would agree with you. Those are somewhat outside the scope of the Planning Commission's authority, which is really to focus on whether or not these projects should be added to the capital improvement program, which would allow then the county to make their own spending decisions regarding the REIT funds.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Those statements made by a planning commissioner seems to be way out of line, but just my perspective.
I would add, though, that it was not just one commissioner. Many of the planning commissioners expressed concerns about the use of taxpayer dollars for something that the county would not ultimately own. And that was in addition to concerns about the amount that we intend to spend.
Yeah, and I hope the planning commissioners understand that we have many leased buildings in the county.
They may or may not understand that, but yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so what's next in this? We've got summary of the Planning Commission meeting.
So the options that you have before you, those are recommendations. And the recommendations of, I believe, the brief conversation that between the two of you had on Tuesday, you want to delay this conversation or the decision, whether you want to accept the recommendations of the Plan Commission or not. And that's within your purview. If you do not accept the recommendations of the Plan Commission, you want to add those projects, then the public hearing, we have an item for your consideration on Tuesday to set the public hearing that will include those two items. And that will probably the decision the board may need to have out of the respective, I believe Commissioner Edwards stated, and Commissioner Mejia, to be part of that discussion on Tuesday morning. And I do have this item already on the agenda, but I wanted to hear this conversation before I send that out.
It makes sense to me.
I guess from my perspective, even what was talked about by planning commissioners and whether it's their prerogative or not, or purview or not, I guess. I don't think, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like they've at least listened to some of our discussions, because I'm kind of the same frame of mind that they are, I guess. So if they're reflecting that, I've talked about that openly in public. Actually, I talked about it on Tuesday to a degree. Wednesday, I guess. Yesterday. Okay, I had a public meeting. I was talking at a group yesterday. Anyway, so I'm in favor of accepting the recommendation from the Planning Commission, because it matches what I've been talking about all along. I don't know that we do have that need at this point in time, because we don't know what the workforce is going to look like in the future.
Sounds like
That's
they're
one of
all,
the big things.
sounds like they're also recommending that we not add the renovations to Montman, which you just voted to purchase. So we're just gonna leave that vacant and
Well,
unimproved?
I
Until the
do
planning
have,
Commission decides they wanna let us improve it?
I do have a question about the agreement over at Mottman. I was under the understanding when we went forward that the main principal in the ownership of that property had died, and that the estate was attempting to be settled, and because of that, they either wanted to sell to us or have us vacate it, basically, and we'd have to find other space. But in reviewing this commercial lease agreement, I'm just wondering if that is the push that I thought it was, because it looks like here we've got until 2025 to make those decisions, and then we can also extend it or something for a period of time. And I didn't know how many property rights went along with the lease versus owning, when a property is going to be changed, when a commercial property is going to be changing hands. So I don't know the answer. I'm a little confused over some of the material versus what I went away from some of those original meetings with, that this was, well, we need to get this done because we're going to lose out on this. I know we looked at some other areas, but so I'm kind of concerned to have a little more discussion on this. So I kind of feel like maybe the Planning Commission does on that issue. I don't think we have to be in a rush, but I'd like to have a little more information from legal on this commercial lease agreement.
So if I may interject, I apologize for interrupting, but the Mottman purchase, we just, our feasibility period has expired. We are under a contract, and the purchase will close on, this is June, July 2nd. So if at this point you want to turn back, then we will be breaking a contract and have to we would lose at a minimum our earnest money, which is $50,000.
I
But the
guess,
board had authorized the purchase.
okay, I guess that kind of brings me to the point, were we premature in making that agreement if we knew we had to go through the comprehensive plan or the update that we just put the planning commission through? So did we get the cart before the horse on this thing? And if so, how did that happen? And the lease issue that I'm talking about, what would be the understanding from staff
I'm sorry.
when we would have to?
What document are you referring to, Commissioner?
A commercial lease extension.
That's between the county and the current owner on the space the auditor's office uses?
I think that's it, yes.
Yeah, so that is the lease agreement that we have, and yes, it has an end date as to when the lease expires with the options to extend it. So
Yes.
that's the existing lease agreement that we have, if I believe that's the document that you're referring to.
Right.
So help me understand, what questions do you have on the current lease agreement?
I'm curious, when is the actual move-out date that is in place based on this agreement, considering the extensions? So it looks like it goes to 2025 with some extensions. Are there,
So
do we have till 2028 or?
Well,
Yeah.
so it seems to me that we're talking two different things, if I may.
Okay,
We're discussing, what you're bringing at this point is the current lease agreement that we have with the property owner that has an end date with an option of extension.
okay.
That has nothing to do with the purchase of the building.
Well, it does have things to do with how we kind of hurried up and dealt with this purchase of this building and maybe got ahead of ourselves in the process. That's all I'm asking.
So now you put me in the position to reveal the many conversations that you had on an executive sessions and many of the executive sessions. So to clarify your comments, Commissioner, if I may, you're right. The property owner died, and the trust was in the process of selling the building. And they asked the county if we want to purchase that building. And that's how the whole conversation started.
Okay.
So that process, purchasing the building, if I may, has nothing to do with the lease agreement that we had on this building. So I'm trying to understand what the nexus that you're drawing on those two.
Well, what I'm wondering about, I was under the impression that we needed to hurry up and do something, or we were gonna lose out. We needed to get going on this purchase. That was the way that was what I came away with.
You're absolutely correct, because the trust, after the owner died, asked the county if the first right of refusal before this property can be put up for sale to the general public.
Okay. But it was my understanding that we had to get out of the building sooner rather than execute the extension on the lease, which would have made us able to stay there for how long? I guess I don't know the answer to that. So that, I guess, again, it's probably a good reason to have an attorney here at a meeting like this, because I don't want to reveal anything from an executive session if I'm not supposed to. So how do I couch my questions to get to the bottom of this? Because I'm a little confused about when we had to get out. In the first place, that I was under the impression that we needed to hurry up and do something. So now we're hearing from the planning commission, they had some concerns. I don't know what those concerns are. But did we get ahead of ourselves is what I'm asking staff in making a decision and signing some kind of an agreement? And where was our attorney during all that discussion? And were they involved? Did they get it right? Did we get bad advice? That's all I'm wondering about. That's kind of where I'm at on the whole thing. I just don't know what to do if we're not gonna have, what's the point of the planning commission if we didn't present this stuff to the planning commission and get everything through the process in the proper sequence? So.
I just want to emphasize and take a moment to emphasize that we, for the purpose of the comprehensive plan amendment, we followed the proper process and sequence and provided the planning commission with all the normal and proper information we would for an amendment of this type.
Well, that very well might be, but are we ahead of ourselves? I'm hearing from staff that should we decide to delay this or hear what the planning commission maybe has to say about it, it looks like they've discovered some things that they have concerns about. And so we were premature in signing that agreement. I just don't know. That's kind of where I'm at on it. I would like to have that explained to me. I don't want to have the county get in trouble, but if we're in trouble, why are we getting in trouble? Why did we jump the gun if that's what we did? I don't know that that's what we did. So you're the attorney, sir. I don't know. I'm a little confused on the whole thing.
Well, I don't understand, just with all due respect, I don't understand any of your comments about Mottman. I'm not even sure what the issue is. I guess I understand that you're asking, you know, chicken or the egg. I mean, do you have to get approval from planning commission and then ultimately yourself to put it on the capital improvement program?
Planning commission does not approve, provides recommendations to the board.
Right, but
With all due respect.
the suggestion though is that we would need to go through that process and have it on our capital improvement program before we would be prudent in purchasing the building. I mean, ultimately, we decide whether to put the project on the capital improvement program. So that seems backwards to me too. So I mean, I kind of see what you're saying, but I think if you flip the order, it would seem even more back putting the cart before the horse. If we were having a public hearing on doing a bunch of improvements to a building we hadn't even purchased yet, and we hadn't finalized the negotiations for, I think that's putting the cart before the horse. But that's about the only piece of what you said that I understand at all, because I don't remember any discussion in the purchase of Mottman about a lease and an expiration of lease. It was about the auditor needed more space for her ballot processing center, and this change of ownership or whatever created an opportunity to purchase and provide that space, as well as consolidate some other lease buildings into one place and meet other space needs. So what you're talking about the expiration of lease, I don't understand what that is about. I never heard anything about that. That wasn't part of my consideration as to why I voted ultimately to purchase Mottman. So I'm a little confused as to what the planning commission thinks the commissioners ought to do, given that we purchased the building and they're not comfortable recommending that we make the necessary improvements. Is their plan that we just continue to treat it as an investment, continue to lease it out to third parties? I don't think we're even allowed to do that. We're not in the business of commercial real estate, and I think there's laws against us doing that. So I'm really confused by that recommendation. So between my confusion about that and my confusion about the basis for the space needs analysis, because I don't know if they knew that the board considered that staff actually presented the possibility of updating the space needs analysis, and the board voted not to do that because we didn't feel like we'd get enough useful information for the price. I think you and I both voted for that, against that, I should say. But that sounds like what the planning commission thinks we should have done. But we decided not to do that. And so there's obviously a difference of opinion between the board, all of us on the board, and the planning commission, because we directly voted against what they see as intrinsic to their decision or to make these additions. So I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what their questions are about Mottman. You didn't really say, Jennifer, what you said they needed more information, or they weren't
Yes,
comfortable yet?
the motion that they passed was actually to delay a decision on Mottman until a follow-up work session can be held, but they were not specific as to what additional information they would require to feel more comfortable with making a recommendation on that.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a more nuance, you know, when I hear all of this, like if there was a really like targeted concern about an aspect of the cost improvement, tenant improvements at 3,000, I think that's something that a layperson might, you know, need more information about, or if it's confusing why we're doing that. But I mean, when you lay out all of these different things, some of which don't even make sense, frankly, to me, it seems like that there might have been planning commissioners that just didn't like anything. And I don't see a logical, you know, when they can't see what we're trying to do at Mottman for the auditor's office, and they're relying on telecommuting to say that the county doesn't have space needs that we've documented for years and years and years that we have. I mean, I think that's an irrefutable fact. Even commissioners and former commissioners who didn't support the new courthouse acknowledged that we had the space needs. It was just about, you know, location, cost, blah, blah. I mean, there's never been any dispute in the county commission that we have space needs. So if that's the basis for their recommendation, I don't really have a problem setting it aside. And then you've got this issue about, you know, but I'm just confused as to kind of, kind of going back to what Commissioner Edwards looped back to at the beginning, which is, what did they have to base all their decisions on, and did they have the information they needed? Because both of these projects kind of have quite a history embedded in what justifies them and why we got to where we have gotten to with them. And it's not something that you're just going to walk into a boardroom here, you know, look over a few papers and understand the nuances of why the board has gotten to this point on these particular projects.
Yeah, just for perspective on that, first of all, every single project on the capital improvement program has gone through significant work before it lands on the capital improvement program. You can think about the parks plan that goes through all of its own process and public meetings. And then at the end of the day, what we bring forth to the Planning Commission is those lists of projects and expenditures out of that parks plan that's already gone through a bunch of other review. And then we need to now put those into the capital improvement program and put the 6-year expenditures out there for transparency for the public to understand what the county plans to spend money on for parks. Same thing for every other facility. Same thing for these two projects. They go through their own very in-depth feasibility and financial analysis. Not all of that goes before the Planning Commission. What goes before the Planning Commission is the comprehensive plan amendment to actually list the project and the costs and describe the project and why we need it, and for them to host basically a public hearing and public input onto that, and then make a recommendation to you. So it's very possible that they do not have all of the in-depth ins and outs about all the financial pieces of these projects. They normally would not for a specific project. I think there was additional attention to this because it's county buildings to serve county needs. It's not providing necessarily a park for kids to go play in. It's to provide offices, and it's well documented in our comprehensive plan that there are these space needs, and that was also provided to them, that information. But I can't speak to their, you know, opinions or interpretation of that information or what additional information they would need. They had their opportunities to ask questions in a work session and then during their deliberations at the public hearing last night. And so all I can do is transmit to you their recommendation. And I will give them an opportunity to write the formal recommendation letter, sending that to the chair this morning to fill out, and to maybe if they put additional findings in there, that might be instructive for you. And I'll try to turn that around quickly if I can with the chair of the Planning Commission to have you have all those full findings by your Tuesday morning discussion.
Okay, and just looping back to Commissioner Edwards and what he asked me, I don't think you'd want to go through all this process for a project on a building you hadn't yet purchased, but I don't have that legal, it's not my area of law, and I don't really know, so I don't have that answer for you.
Yeah, well, I don't have that answer either. I guess what I am concerned about is what's the point of the Planning Commission if we waited until after we did something to even present something to them? That's what I'm concerned about. Where is the sequence of events, or how are they supposed to fall? Even like, where's legal right now that deals in this type of an issue? I don't think it is fair to use, not your expertise, but somebody that represents us must have that type of expertise. What is the point of the Planning Commission? Is it to be a rubber stamp for things that we might submit to them? Or is it their purpose to really review and make logical decisions for, I know they don't have anything to do with the budget, but for expenditures of the citizens' tax dollars? And it's my understanding that you put things on the comp plan and the capital plan well ahead of time so that you don't make impromptu decisions that maybe aren't well thought out. And it looks like we've got ahead of ourselves if we're being told by staff now that, well, if we don't go ahead with this, we're gonna lose our down payment, if you will. I don't know if you want to call it that. So that's my concern here. Have we made a blunder? And if we made a blunder, I'm gonna say it was based on recommendation from staff, that if we made, I don't even know that we made a blunder. So.
And by blunder, you mean purchasing Mottman without having the approval of the capital project?
Well, yeah, not having went through the proper sequence of events that it's gonna take to move forward on that kind of an expenditure. I keep referring back, you weren't here when this happened, and there's the fish plant. We had the fish plant building that the county bought for a substantial amount of money, not quite as much as what we're paying, and it was never utilized. And eventually, after about 17 years, and I don't remember what year we sold that. Did we sell it in 18? Do you remember, County Manager? Did we sell that Mottman?
Just about that.
In about 18?
3,400?
Yeah, is it? So I don't want to get in that kind of a situation. I'm not saying we're in that kind of a situation, but did they not follow the rules right as well? And because of that, the county lost a lot of money. They sat there with an empty building for a lot of years. I want to say 16 years. And I don't want to make mistakes as I'm sitting here trying to make the best decisions that I can. And this makes me gun shy that we got the cart before the horse is the simplest way that I can put it, because I'm not an attorney at all. So I have no background in what you might have, and I realize there's specialties in the fields. So how come we don't have an attorney here that can advise us on some of this stuff, even right now?
Because Commissioner, you just raising on the spot legal questions. And even an attorney, if an attorney was present, he or she will not be able to give you a legal opinion on the spot. So that, with all the respect, that's an unrealistic expectation. And what I'm planning to do, I'm scheduling an executive session on Tuesday for you to have a conversation with your attorney, whether she is in the position to give you on-the-spot legal opinions. Because you're raising legal questions on the spot.
You know, I don't know enough about this, but I do want to refer in January of 2017, the Washington State Supreme Court ruled in what's called the Island County case that said that the county commissioners from Island County could not hire outside representation to advise them on technical issues. The court further went on to say that they must depend on legal advice from the prosecuting attorney. And so that's the rule that we are living under today. And personally, I think it's a mistake. I think we should be able to have experts in a field advise us so we don't make decisions like the Tyson fish plant. So I wasn't here for that. I wasn't here in this position for that. And I recall them coming to me when I was sheriff. The county came to me and said, well, we've bought this building. Could you use this as a jail annex? And I said, no, I don't know. Have you had it reviewed by an engineer or architect, or have you had anything that's looked into it? Again, they bought the building without even knowing what they were gonna do with it. I never have understood that purchase. I know what we intend to do with the Mottman building, but I'm not so sure that it's financially feasible if we could continue to lease at, say, $8 a foot without any of the maintenance problems and everything that goes with it, and we could lease that for another 10 years, and come to find out that by buying it, we end up spending a lot more of the taxpayers' money, and maybe we didn't get as good a deal. So I'm having second thoughts about our decision to move forward and make the purchase, but I made those decisions on recommendations from staff. And I don't recall legal spending any time with us going over, should we be using our own attorneys to set up this deal? Should we use outside folks to set the deal up? Should we be using realtors, brokers? There's a lot of question here, and now the Planning Commission saying, well, we'd like to know more about this. I'm all for giving them as much information as they could possibly utilize to see if we're making a good decision. So, I don't know. I'm in a quandary right now. I really am. I'm very concerned that we may have signed off on something ahead of time, before it was, I don't know, legal to do so. I don't know if that's a proper term, or if we got it out of sequence. But somehow or another, it sounds like we're expecting the Planning Commission to rubber stamp something we sent to them, which I don't understand that either. What's the point of the Planning Commission? They're asking for more information. Okay.
On that point,
Excuse me.
I mean, I don't think that all decisions that go to the Planning Commission are equal, in the sense that there are things that the Planning Commission, that come to the board that I don't know anything about it. I never heard of this thing. Planning Commission's been working on it for 2 years. They've spent, 20 work sessions on it. I mean, and in that case, the weight I put on what the Planning Commission gives me is substantial, because you can just count up the hours. They know more about it than I do.
Yeah.
Other things like this, I mean, this came straight through the board. We've had work session after work session after work session after work session. They're seeing it, on a very much more superficial level, but we've got a process that needs to go through them, and part of what they do is vet public testimony. It's another outlet for the public to come in and give extra input, and we get that disseminated to us. But in that case, the weight I give Planning Commission recommendation, it's not 0, but it's probably lower, because I've got probably more hours into the topic than they have. So it's not all the same. It's just a variety of grab bag of things that they have to do. Some of them are just kind of legal requirements in a sense. Other things, they get really deep down into the weeds and they draft, and they basically are coming up with some really substantial, we saw examples of that last year that the commissioners approved. But anyway.
So, I agree with Commissioner Edwards that, you know, the planning commission needs to be given enough time for the upcoming projects. And that was, they do that every year on every amendment on the capital facilities plan. So when they reviewed this last year before they provide a recommendation to you, there's no way that we could set a need of the amendment of the 3000 Pacific Avenue. That wasn't even part of the scope. This just came this year. And I believe that is the amendment process that we go through. When unexpected or something changes mid-year is when you have the amendment to go through. It's similar to when you go through on the budget amendments of the budget. You made decisions last year based on that information, things change, and you adjust through an amendment process. And that really is what you have in front of you. Yeah, ideally, yeah, if we would have known the Modman building was available last October or September, whenever they reviewed, we have included. If we would have known that 3000 Pacific Avenue was an option for us to consider as leasing, we would have added that project back in September of 2020. But those two elements did not materialize as an options for the county until the second or third month of this year.
I have to say, I didn't know the planning commission was even gonna be involved in reviewing the Mottman thing until just very recently, in the last week or two. I had no idea that that was part of the required process. So that's what I'm concerned about, that we got ahead of ourselves in moving forward with something. And maybe in the end, if the planning commission said, well, gee, it's gonna, you know, you guys are making a step here that's gonna cost the taxpayers a lot of money, and you could have had that building for another 10 years for half that amount of money expended for that. And so that really bothers me that we got ahead of ourselves. Yes, we did get an offer because of a death in some kind of a partnership or something. I don't know all the particulars about it. And then apparently, through an estate settlement, they wanted to get rid of that property.
But how could the planning commission say what would happen in the, I mean, the building's sold to someone else, they could boot us out, just like we're booting out other tenants.
I thought that was true too, but I'm told that is not true. There are property rights that come with this type of a contract. And Robin.
So you, okay, Robin, yeah.
Thank you, commissioners. On the subject of getting ahead of ourselves in the purchase of Mottman related to what is on the CIP, I would just like to clarify that the CIP has a land acquisition item in it currently, that the purchase of Mottman is appropriate under land acquisition. And as I had stated, I think on Tuesday, we added that for the purpose of transparency, but we are not at all putting the cart before the horse, if you will, in process. We could easily purchase it. Land acquisition using REIT is part of the plan that already exists.
And if it was a good point, because when the board purchased building number 6, I believe, and which Commissioner was part of that process, we didn't go through the planning commission to add that purchase, because we use different funding to do so.
So is the argument that because we have a lease that allows us to stay there for so many years that we're gonna be losing money because we're purchasing the building rather than just using the lease? But then at the atrium, we're leasing, so we're losing money because we're not purchasing the building.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but if we weren't required to put this in front of the planning commission, okay, I mean, I'm all for transparency, but it kind of confuses the issue, because they came back with, sounds like, they're not too thrilled with the whole process, but we're asking them to review something that they don't have any authority to review. I don't know the answer to that either, so. But yes, if we are spending a lot more of the taxpayers' money than we need to do to have the same asset available to us, then I don't know that that's a good expenditure. I want to get the best deal I can for the taxpayers that are paying the bill. So I am definitely confused about, okay, we asked them to review this. Is that what we expected, was just a rubber stamp, I guess, to send it through? Because we definitely, I didn't even know it was going in front of the planning commission until the last week or so. On this part, I knew the atrium thing was gonna have to. And I can't disagree with the atrium issue that they're questioning, because that kind of matches what I've been talking about all along. But now I'm a little gun shy on, if we're spending money we don't have to spend. I thought we were gonna use money from the CARES Act on the Mottman project, because we need to have all that additional space for adequate social distancing and to accommodate a lot of the older volunteers and things that work on elections and do a lot of volunteer activity for the county. So I thought some of that was gonna be handled through the CARES Act. So am I wrong on that, or was part of our purchase price coming out of the CARES Act?
At no time did I suggest that we were going to use CARES money to purchase
what?
mop.
And in fact, we had the discussion, and again, we all this in the executive session, you put me in that position to reveal that information. Just to remind you, Commissioner, the intent was to borrow from a different fund until we can issue the $50 million bond. And that was the funding strategy was presented in many occasions to you. So never was intended to the CARES money, because that's not qualified. So let me go back to the comments related to the Planning Commission and their role. They provide recommendations to the board, and the board over the years have exercised the legislative authority to accept the recommendations, modify the recommendations, or not accept those recommendations at all. And that's within your purview as well. So this is this is part of the process that you have exercised in the past related to the recommendations from the Planning Commission.
Okay, well, it looks like we've got a discussion for Tuesday teed up with the full board
So what I have is
and council.
yeah, what I have is Commissioner Irwa's question whether the legality of purchase the building prior to the Planning Commission hearing this item. Is that correct?
Well, as the Mottman, right?
The month.
Yeah, I mean, did we get ahead of ourselves, that's all. When did we pay the earnest money that we're talking about? When did that happen? I remember voting on it, that to move ahead a couple weeks ago, I think. But when did that happen?
So a couple weeks ago, you voted to move ahead to finalize the purchase. The vote to put the earnest money down, or the guidance, was given to me at the start of the feasibility period, which I believe was 60 days. So 2 months ago, I was instructed to enter into the purchase contract. And before that, I was given guidance to come to an agreement on a price, and brought you at least 3 proposals.
Was the planning commission's, was there a discussion or their recommendation or whatever about not purchasing the building? Or was it about the fact that the board has purchased the building and they don't want the improvement, the money, aren't ready to recommend the improvement? Or were they really weighing in on the actual purchase of the building, which is what it sounds like based on Commissioner Edwards talking about utilizing the lease versus the purchase, because that's really a decision that's already been made and outside their purview, and it doesn't sound like they really understood that.
I'm not sure how much they understood about where the county is in its lease or purchase. They were looking at specifically whether or not to add the project description of the Mottman complex to the capital improvement program with the estimated expenditures planned in 2021 from REAP funds. That's really the limit to what they can provide a recommendation on. And so I'm not sure how much they knew about exactly where you were in all of the financial pieces. That's not normally information we would bring, but if they had asked us about that, and again, their decision on Mottman is to delay that project until they can have a follow-up work session. So they probably do have questions about that. I just don't know what those questions are at this time.
And I did describe at their request that we would be using the property to expand the space for the auditor and move in both facilities and records that are each in separate leased spaces, and that we would, as the current tenants moved out. So I described that to the Planning Commission along with the source of the money.
Okay, anything else we need to address?
Well, there is one other thing I haven't heard. How long could we stay in the Mottman building that we currently occupy if we were to execute all the provisions of the lease? Because I thought we were getting kicked out too. I thought that's what the ultimatum was going to be, that we were going to be, the lease was going to expire and we had to find something else. So let's get with this program and purchase that. So my question here is, if we would follow the original lease, the original commercial lease, which all the other terms apparently apply according to this recent extension number 5, how long could have we stayed there? And if the Planning Commission was looking at this from a perspective of, I mean, they're trying to do things for the taxpayers, is my estimation. Do the best job they can in whatever ordinances we create or purchases that we make, it sounds like. If it's required to go through them, they're gonna review it and come up with what's best for the taxpayers.
But Mary Hall presented to us at least a half a dozen times that the current, even if we could stay in the current space, it wasn't adequate for what her needs are at this point to conduct a presidential or major election. So that's what we're trying to.
Yes, I agree with you.
And I don't know that the Planning Commission has heard a dozen presentations from Mary Hall about this.
Allow me to bring back the conversations that occurred while you were considering the purchase of the Mottman project building. So, so you may recall, as you stated, Commissioner Edwards, the owner passed away. The trust in the process of building give the county the option of first refusal, and that's how we exercise that. The lease was discussed, and the risk related to the lease is we didn't have any assurance that the new owner will extend the lease after that lease is expired that you have it in front of you. There was no assurance, and that was the conversation that it was a risk. It was not related that just because the property owner, the new property will come and will kick us out the next day. It was not having an assurance that after the lease expired, the new property owner will extend the lease.
I was under the impression that they would maybe not extend the lease.
Well, that was the risk, and that risk
we would have to leave.
No, the risk was presented to you,
Yes.
and that was the risk.
But I did think we had to leave, we possibly would have to leave because of exactly what you're saying. But now I'm wondering, could have we stayed there 10 more years if that's what we wanted to do, even though that building would have been sold to somebody else? And I guess, who can answer that question for me? I know I can.
How long is the extension
Well,
extend.
I don't know the answer to all that. That's,
Well,
but somebody made,
So any type of extension of a lease is mutually agreed.
well, except somehow in commercial leases, you are granted some kind of property rights. I don't know what they are. That's why I'm asking, there must be some
There could be
legal
options
advice.
to extend that are built in, but, you know, I don't. But I mean, Mary was, I understood, I mean, again, I'm not saying that I'm not saying you're wrong about that being presented as a risk, but I can tell you in my mind, that really wasn't the foremost thing at the top of my list of considerations. I was hearing the auditor saying, I'm gonna have to, extension or no extension, I'm gonna need more space. That's, you know, I mean, that was back when we were talking about new courthouse. I had discussions with her about bigger ballot processing center built into the, I mean, it was, the need has been there for a long time for her to have more space to do what she needs to do, especially now because there's, you know, there was this past election, there was observers that needed to be there, and there's new scrutiny on the process because of claims of fraud, and so there's got to be more. And then there was social distancing built in. I mean, there's all these factors that were just cascading toward her need for more space for that ballot processing center, and we didn't have control over that space to make that happen for her.
And you may, if you may recall on these conversations, you asked to do a survey of all the available properties that can suit the needs of the expansion. And the return to that assessment was none. So you did ask that, you as a board.
Right. Mary was taken on a tour of the few available spaces, and they were not considered suitable.
I remember Mary, I think, looked at Toys R Us or some empty building over there at some point. I still don't have an answer, and I would like to have staff get me an answer. How long could have we stayed in that building under the current lease? I mean, that's all I want to know, because I was under the impression that we were gonna have to go. And
So
that
it should be an
kind
easy
of forced
answer.
my,
So what
that
I-
forced my hand.
We asked for a legal opinion on that. However, it's going to be qualified by the fact that the new owner had the building sold, and it most likely would have. They had other interest in the Mottman complex. The new owner could have broken a lease with us, just as I have been told we can break the lease that we have with current tenants.
Oh, okay, I don't know the answer to any of that, but I'd sure like to hear from legal what that would entail. Does that mean we end up going to court over something? I guess if you break a lease, you have an option to let the judge decide, I guess. I don't know. And I hate making these decisions when I don't know all the answers, that's all. And it looks like something's going on at the planning commission that they had some questions. And why, I have no idea.
And I did, well, just for the record, I think I was the last commissioner to come on board with the Mottman purchase. I had a lot of questions too, and we
Yes,
had
you did.
multiple executive sessions, and I, you know, and I think I was sort of the last on board. We voted unanimously, but, you know, I just want that to be clear, because you know, I've been pretty aggressive to an extent about wanting to meet the space needs of the county. But, you know, I am mindful of the real estate components and the taxpayers' dollars and being, you know, responsible about that. So I just want that to be clear. There was a lot of discussions, and some of the same questions that I'm sure the planning commissioners were asking, you know, the board had as well, and we had those addressed. And I think our legal counsel was at some of those sessions, because a lot of them happened in executive session. And there was a variety of opinions on the board, but I just wanted to state that.
And I agree with you. I think that you ended up, you know, the last guy on board, getting the vote or whatever. I think maybe I was early on because I was pretty convinced that, well, looked like we needed to do this. But part of my being convinced was we were gonna get evicted. And so I didn't want that to happen and have us be under the gun.
Well, I would say unless we, I mean, you can't say we would have been evicted, but
No.
you can't say we wouldn't have been. I mean,
No,
unless
I
we
know.
have built-in options for extension, built into the contract, which should be in black and white to whoever's got the contract handy, then we had that risk. We bore that risk of being, it's not of being evicted, it's just being, not being able to remain there. And so, we should be able to have that information Tuesday. But this question, I guess you started with the question though, and I really hope we can get past it, of this idea that I can't imagine, again, it's not my area of legal expertise, but I cannot imagine that we would be required to get capital improvement project approval before we would be permitted to purchase a building. Because to me, that would be putting the cart before the horse.
I don't know the answer to that.
So I don't think.
I think I have two questions.
Yeah.
The commissioner was raised. Whether it's the board is legally authorized to purchase a building without having that project listed on the capital facilities plan.
Well, when the purchase of the building is, when there's a set of improvements that are implicit in the purchase,
Yeah.
do those improvements have to be approved and added before you can go to the, that's the question.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that's true, but that's the question.
So would that, Travis will be the one who can answer that, you think, Jennifer?
I think that's a good question to pose to Travis. Again, I think this comes down to state requirements with the source of the funding in this case, which is the more important piece. So I think that'd be a good question for Travis.
So will you follow up on that with them?
Because
And also,
just to flesh that out though, because the net result of it is what Commissioner Edwards is saying, is that, well, then the net, if the board purchases a building and it's like the whole point is to do these improvements, then you go through this process, you are essentially handing the planning commission a process that you're expecting their approval of, in a sense, because you wouldn't have purchased a building without it. So I mean, that's where you get to that whole point of cart before the horse thing, and I think
And I still.
there just may be no other way around it.
So I still struggle with the word approval.
Okay, well,
With all due respect, I struggle with the word approval because the planning commission does not approve, provides recommendations to the board.
but the law says they have to give us that recommendation.
Right. So, and Robin, can you check with Scott on the lease, please?
Yes.
And I believe the question on the lease agreement is obviously it's pretty clear as to when the lease expired. And we have, I believe, options to have it extended. So I believe that's clear on the lease. I believe the question Commissioner Edwards is asking is, would the new property would have been given as 3 months, 6 months notice for us to leave? And is that part of their purview?
And to just follow up on that question though, I mean, on this, it says that all other terms and conditions of the original commercial lease agreement remain in full force and effect. And that's, so we're making an extension on number 5 is an extension. And it says, so we'd have to review the commercial lease agreement as well as extension number 5 to come up with an answer. But when we as a board make decisions, we're making those decisions mostly based on staff recommendations, mostly. If the staff recommendations, if the sequence isn't right or if something's missing, we're not gonna know that. But yet we're held ultimately responsible. That's where I keep coming back to legal being able to advise us and give legal time to review things. And that goes back to the whole business. We're trying to change how we do business, but currently we get stuff put in front of us. Sometimes that's the first we've seen of it. And I don't think that's the way to do business. I think everything we do should have adequate review time. And in the case of legal, it should always have them have the ability to review everything before they ever give us legal advice. How can they give us adequate legal advice if they're not getting the stuff ahead of time. Now, if somebody dies and we have to rush into things because of an estate, I recognize there are extenuating circumstances. But I think as a practice by this board, I keep pushing that we need information early. Because if we make bad decisions, I like to think it's based because we got bad information. I don't think we're intentionally making bad decisions. We're just making them on the information that is given to us. So that's why I'm kind of a stickler for getting it all right, the sequence right, the timing right. And if we need to postpone, move forward, whatever, I think that's all part of the deal. So.
And absolutely you have the option to postpone, not to make decisions, to change, obviously, whatever process you like to take. And we are providing you with ahead of time those documentation. And in fact, the appraisal that you had in front of you, Commissioner, was provided to you over 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So,
we get a lot of material.
so then, you asked me that we're presenting information that on the spot in front of you. We're working, providing the information ahead of time. We're providing you a week in advance all the documentation. And in this particular case, that appraisal was, again, provided to you 2 weeks ago, as well as the appraisal provided to the rest of the commissioners.
Yes.
So, and
I
I would appreciate if, and not just to all of you as a commissioners, if you have any legal question that you'd like to address in an upcoming meeting, please let me know, because that's my responsibility. Let me know in advance what type of questions will you have, or perhaps you may have, because given the information ahead of time, I assume that you will review that and you come to a conclusion that you have a question. So if you have any questions related to an upcoming item, please let me know, and I will make sure that you have the legal opinion or perspective prior to making that decision.
Robin had her hand up.
I just need to reiterate that on Mottman, we have entered a contract. We are past the feasibility stage. We are scheduled to close on July 2nd. And if the board should wish at this point to back out of that contract, that's something I need to know.
But they do have the option to back out before July 2nd.
Well, yeah, for a price.
Yeah, no, I understand that the board does have that option.
We haven't closed yet.
Yeah.
But time is of the essence.
Okay, are we good teed up for Tuesday?
Yep, so I think I got the 2 questions. Hopefully we can get the answers to those questions. And let me know if the answer to those questions need into an executive session or just in the public.
I just have one real quick thing though. I mean, when we get information, we get the information, but if we don't get it soon enough to review it, we don't know enough about it to ask the right question. So that's kind of the cart before the horse as well. So, and maybe, okay, I didn't digest this as good as I should have. Possibly, but it's a lot of material to review. So I don't think we can always be on top of everything that we're expecting staff to be on top of. I just don't think it's feasible that we
Well,
can
the
do it.
planning commission met last night, so I mean, in a sense, like, we didn't even know that there were gonna be these questions or these wrinkles to.
Right, that's
So-
what I'm saying. So,
I just think it's part of the way we have to, our sausage making process, as you say, is just that things are gonna come up, and then we have to kind of respond as they come up. 3 commissioners, different questions, different legal components. Nothing can be anticipated, I mean, not nothing, everything can't be anticipated in advance.
And also, you do have the option, as you have exercised that in the past, to delay any decisions.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Sometimes you don't, so depending.
Usually we do.
And if you don't feel comfortable delaying decisions, and that has been part of your practice as well, so.
But doesn't this though, just to wrap that up, doesn't this actually have a component where it needs to be combined with our budget amendment at the end of the month, or there was some there's some alignment of timing that we're up against.
The
here.
budget amendment is the expenditure authority. That you need to exercise.
And
And we wanted this done before we did that.
We're just coinciding.
They have to go together to be able to amend the CIP.
So
If you
can't delay
have,
this decision too far.
So Tuesday will be,
Sorry, go ahead, Robin.
no, just,
how about one other question for Robin? Can that closing date be extended? I mean, is that something that we could take a look at with whomever, the broker or the attorneys involved or the real estate people or maybe the owner of the estate or who's ever dealing with it? Is that an option that we might be able to do? I don't want to forfeit the down payment, obviously, but I want to get it right.
I could certainly ask our realtors to explore if the closing date can be extended, but I mean, it was supposed to have closed before the end of this month. We agreed on the 2nd of next month for the purpose of a clean break in terms of lease payments and escrow and tax calculations, but I can explore extending that.
Okay, well, along with masks, we ought to have aspirin bottles in here, I guess, at the same time.
Okay, so let's adjourn this board
Yes,
work
sir.
session. We have
We
a
have
meeting that
like
was
20
scheduled at
minutes.
10. Can we pick that up at 10:30?
Yeah.
So we'll be back at 10:30 for our 10 a.m. Commissioner check-in.
And unfortunately, it's a different Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did we get dinged?